Many years ago, Guangdong released the first report on the province's rich second generation. The report noted that in the second decade of the new century, wealth handover had become a nationwide phenomenon. This was because the rich second generation were no longer scattered individuals, but began to collectively emerge as a social class. Due to the original sin in their parents, wealth, negative news about them had been constant over the long term. As a result, the term rich second generation carried heavy negative connotations from the start. They regarded it as a hostile stigma and a demonized imagination of themselves. Many of them wanted to shed the label of rich second generation and instead be called new generation entrepreneurs. Interestingly, when time entered the third decade, not only was the name rich second generation not discarded, but it also became one of the most enviable titles in society. Parallel to the rich second generation was the poor second generation. They had many labels, such as migrant workers entering cities for work and young working-class people. While the rich second generation wanted to get rid of their label and be called new generation entrepreneurs, the poor second generation also refused to be labeled as migrant workers. They believed that titles like white-collar workers were merely external symbols. The so-called name change was, in fact, a repositioning of the identities of the new generation of rich and poor people, as well as a readjustment of social relations. The rich second generation did not want to be called so because they wanted to cleanse the stains of wealth accumulation outside the law in the past and gain a more legitimate status. The poor second generation did not want to be called migrant workers because they no longer wanted to be in a position of being discriminated against, expelled, marginalized, and exploited in society as in the past. According to one member of the poor second generation, they were part of the extremely poor population, including migrant workers, urban small craftsmen, industrial workers, dissatisfied corporate employees, struggling students from third-tier universities, and those from vocational colleges. In general, they belonged to the lower middle class of society. They usually came from rural families or the urban underclass and small urban families. Some of them studied hard for 12 years to get into university, majored in science, but after starting work, they found that the results were not as expected and the input and output were not proportional. They yearned for love, but in the materialistic urban life, it was out of reach. They did not dare to have too many expectations for the future. Cars and houses were just distant dreams for them. In short, their awkward situation was characterized by lowly status, mediocre lives, dim futures, and emotional emptiness. Today, let's talk about the poor second generation. In April of this year, 4 young people made a suicide pact by jumping off a cliff at Tianmen Mountain in Zhangjiajie. The youngest was 23 years old, and the oldest was only 34. These individuals shared some common characteristics. They were all active on Weibo, came from poor families, and had their own life difficulties. Some were unmarried and trapped in the chains of marriage. Some were mocked by those around them and lived in the shadows. Some were consumed by anxiety about survival. If we must find the most important characteristic, these people all came from rural areas, came to the city but found it difficult to establish themselves, and could not find a sense of identity. Behind this, a vast migrant worker group was exposed. They mostly came from rural areas and small towns, grew up in the urban-rural fringe or industrialized areas, and made a living by working or doing small businesses. They often faced cash shortages and had to shuttle between their hometowns and the places they worked like migratory birds. In 1958, the country issued the first law controlling population movement, and the rural labor force was strictly locked to the land. After the 1980s, rural township enterprises rose, and a group of farmers took the path of enriching themselves without leaving the land. Later, a large number of people began to pour into cities. By 1989, an urgent notice was issued to strictly control the movement of migrant workers, requiring local governments to take measures to restrict farmers from working in coastal areas. Concepts like the Spring Festival travel rush and the migrant worker tide appeared in the public eye for the first time. However, by the 1990s, the carrying capacity of rural land had almost reached its limit, and people had to go out to work to survive. In November 1993, a toy factory in Shenzhen caught fire, with 87 female workers killed and 51 injured. After learning the news, the Hong Kong boss of the factory did not properly handle the incident, but chose to flee overseas overnight. These female workers in the toy factory were the first generation of migrant workers in China. It was not until 2004 that, in the more than 10 years in between, it was the period of primitive accumulation of sweatshops. Due to the insufficient income of migrant workers, they could not afford the expenses of raising children, living, and education in cities. They could only shuttle between their hometowns and the places they worked. This high mobility of labor was also called the mobile labor system. Migrant workers were neither farmers nor workers. Some enterprises in coastal areas did not allow migrant workers to join trade unions, arguing that they were not workers but farmers. As a result, enterprises did not have to pay social security for these migrant workers, arguing that they had land as a guarantee in their hometowns. The interests of migrant workers were not treated equally. A special governance system was formed between local governments and capital, which some people called local authoritarian capitalism. Under such circumstances, migrant workers could only desperately exploit themselves to obtain a meager accumulation of capital and invest all these accumulations into the education and training of their children, hoping that they could break free from the same fate as themselves. The cruelty of history lies in the fact that when these poor second generation entered the city with high hopes, thinking that they could fight for a career with their bare hands, they did not know that they were about to repeat the fate of their parents, and even worse. They suffered a great collapse in their way of survival, mental state, and love and marriage issues. The poor second generation, as the inheritors of poverty, refers to the offspring of poor laborers in the lower strata of society during the period of rapid economic growth in China. They may be the children of urban laid-off workers or the new generation of migrant workers. Their childhood may have been blocked by high tuition fees at the gates of schools. Now they can only enter sweatshops and rely on selling their physical labor to earn meager incomes to make a living. They may also have been supported by their parents to go to university at the cost of their heart and blood, but they can only live in cities as vagrants. There is an online list of 18 criteria for the poor second generation. For example, when others say that money is not a problem for their family, they have to say that their family has no money. During winter and summer vacations, they often need to work in the fields to harvest crops or work in cities to earn tuition fees. They have the impulse to be urban management officers to protect their parents who are driven away every day. They often have the impulse to strangle the throat of fate, but every time their throat is strangled by fate. If you have read Dream of the Red Chamber, the most touching part should be the judgment of Kingwin, aspiring as high as the sky, but life as thin as paper. How many rich second generation have beds of white jade and horses of gold? The poor second generation work in the fields during the day and spin hemp at night. The identity of migrant workers has become young, and their bodies are constantly strengthened into immaturity, backwardness, and ignorance. As a result, they are required to be transformed to catch up with the modern life and work ethics. Their identity forms a modern and semi-trust relationship with entrepreneurs and the management class. However, due to their meager salaries and living conditions, the distance between them and modern people is constantly amplified. It seems that they can never become modern people and are always branded with the label of farmers. When they are woven into modern urban life, they are often regarded as a low-quality group. Whether one has quality or not has become a qualification for integrating into the city. These words may be difficult to understand because the income of migrant workers may not necessarily be lower than that of urban white-collar workers, and they may not necessarily spit indiscriminately or speak vulgar language. So, what exactly causes the discrimination of city people against these country people? The answer lies in real estate, because today's middle-class culture is defined by real estate. After 2000, real estate increasingly focused on cultural taste, often labeling places as high-end residences, aristocratic territories, and lifestyle aesthetics, highly binding houses with life happiness. Chinese people usually live in places called communities in cities, which is a spatial and cultural separation from the outside world and people. There's a very clear boundary between communities, and they are often filled with class hostility. In the eyes of the general public, people living in high-end communities are considered to have high quality, while those living in low-end communities are considered to have low quality. People without property and constantly moving are regarded as social drifters. Real estate is also highly related to education and medical resources at the bottom level. Therefore, whether from an economic or cultural perspective, houses have become the tomb that Chinese people cannot escape in their lifetime. Migrant workers, due to living in urban villages or slums for years, cannot integrate into the middle-class culture because of their living environment. They are exposed to more severe class discrimination than others. University graduates are different from migrant workers. They have received higher education and the baptism of urban culture. In terms of numbers, it seems that there is not much of a problem, but their economic income and working conditions are still at the bottom of society. Although many of the poor second generation have gone to university, their employment prospects are bleak, and their wages can only barely make ends meet because good jobs have basically been taken by the dominant class. For example, the power system, as an absolute monopoly industry with good treatment, has always been a popular employment choice. However, most of these positions are filled internally, and the poor second generation are basically excluded from the political organization system. They rarely join trade unions, have no party or league life, and have no protection from the unit system. Therefore, when they are treated unfairly at work, their way of resistance is to choose to resign, which is the last weapon of the weak. Running around and constantly job hopping only leads them into a cycle of uncertainty. In the crucial issue of love and marriage, young men of the poor second generation are facing the situation of lifelong singlehood. They have been eliminated in the marriage market and may no longer have the opportunity to get married. In cities, bourgeois young ladies are increasingly focusing on calculated choices in love and marriage, and emotions are also included in the calculations. Marriage should not lower one's quality of life. Otherwise, being single is better than getting married. In rural areas, daughters-in-law have become young ladies, and high bride prices are extremely common. Some young rural women hold savings and live a life similar to that of a young lady in the city. They have learned the petty bourgeois lifestyle and urban values from Daoyan, Zhaohangshu and Moments. They have become utilitarian in life, focusing on socializing, fitness, taking photos, and checking in. They take independent Daoyan ladies as their role models. In the last round of the bubble frenzy, due to the illusion of class mobility, women's psychological expectations have been greatly increased, while the number of people who can actually afford it is decreasing. The urban lifestyle of the poor second generation and the successful completion of family reproduction depend on the education level of the previous generation. Once the family cannot provide effective support, young people may not be able to enter into marriage. Even if they do get married and settle down in the city, their marriage may also fall apart because they cannot maintain their life. The failure in life and marriage has led to a strange mental phenomenon among the poor second generation. They have unlimited confidence in the future of the country, but are full of pessimism about their personal prospects. After all, the grand narrative of liberating all of humanity has long been thrown into the dustbin of history. As a result, those globally renowned, infallible, and durable nationalisms have begun to surge again. The sense of deprivation caused by the new order of capitalism has made the poor second generation yearn to find a strong external force to break the logic that assets determine life opportunities, and to confront those abstract and even fictional social adversaries. However, the problem of the duality of the poor second generation often emerges after they enter society and are tempered. A new form of exploitation is rising and becoming a major trend. With dual-need wealth as a powerful weapon, it strongly promotes financial wealth, intelligent wealth identity, and wealth with rent. The malignancy of wealth is realizing the most crazy, dangerous, fastest, most comprehensive, and largest-scale plunder of the people. Repeated 996 work schedules, repeated PUA pickup artist, tactics, repeated being harvested like leeks, repeated being driven away by landlords, repeated being educated by class, and repeated being rejected by future mothers-in-law are all enough to break their defenses. Why do the poor second generation always like to look at the scenery on the left? Because the 2 version of the program has too many bugs, and the 3 version has just created a folder. Regardless of whether you have content or not, it is at least a source of solace in Chen Yuxiang's charity. The poor second generation are facing an identity crisis. Are they urban or rural people? Urban people do not accept their urban identity, and they themselves do not accept their rural identity. The poor second generation drift in cities like atomized individuals, lacking not only the possibility of collective action, but also the ability to build a stable social life. Once faced with a crisis, they may easily take the path of suicide or violent incidents. The identity recognition of the poor second generation has gone through a complete cycle from self-denial to work and finally accepting their farmer identity. Although this has also caused a split in identity recognition, it has at least provided a rural haven for settling down. However, the poor second generation can no longer complete a complete identity recognition cycle. They hope to transform into urban people but see no hope. The way forward is blocked, and the way back is already closed. In this huge life revolution, the new order of capitalism has rushed into people's lives with lightning speed. Facing the same situation, the circumstances of different people are not the same. Some people have begun to calmly practice the urban lifestyle, while others can only work all day, drink, and sigh, watching this bizarre world with a complex gaze.